Picture this. You've spent the last 7 years building a YouTube channel, churning out music video after music video, surpassing a milestone of over 100,000 subscribers, more than 10 million views, which then opens the door for you to do what you really love to do, which is perform live, full-time, for a living. And yes, I mean getting paid to do it. And then imagine you're in a season, you're seeing momentum, doors are opening, you're about to go on your first international tour, and the world stops. Everything involving live performance completely stops. So if you don't know me, my name is Mallory, as Timothy shared, and I moved to New York, back to New York, to pursue an acting career. And over the course of that pursuit, I auditioned and then joined what was at that time a 5-member YouTube a cappella group called Backtrack. We made videos, we met in a small apartment and just churned out a bunch of pop cover videos. And then we were able to, over the course of those several years, turn that into a full-time job. So you can imagine that when we got the call that our Northeast stretch of shows, our first international tour to Vietnam, we were going to get to do an educational tour to Vietnam, was completely canceled due to a globally spreading pandemic. We did what many others did. We hunkered down, we moved away, we baked bread, we binge watched Tiger King. And then we got to work, and we did things like this.
What's wrong with being confident? Oh. What's wrong with being confident?
Lots of videos like that, just over and over again. And in between all of those different things we were doing during COVID, I had a lot of time to think. A lot of us had a lot of time to think and reflect on what matters, and sort of what matters, what we value, and also what we were missing and what we lost. And I really kind of went back to my roots and realized that a lot of who I am today is shaped by my theater training, my theater experience, performing, collaborating, art making. And so I'm going to spend the next few minutes just talking about the different ways that live theater and training, I believe, has as much relevance now, if not more, than it ever has. So to begin, theater creates community and belonging. There's nothing like being a part of a production or a class with theater people. It's just different, y'all. It's just different. And I can just speak to countless experience I had from hole-in-the-wall theater here in New York as a kid to community theater called Kids Who Care in Fort Worth, Texas, all the way through college and beyond. I did a 9-month apprenticeship in Louisville where I spent 9 months with the same 20 people making all kinds of crazy stuff. And just the memories that you make doing that are really unlike any other. The inside jokes, I just remembered as I was preparing, I was in Into the Woods in 9th grade, and in the middle of a really intense scene, Jack, who has to give some really bad news, he says, "I buried her in a footprint," but he had like a bubble in his throat, so he said the line as if like he was Kermit the Frog, and we all just had to hold character. But 20 years later, we're still laughing about that one moment. It's just a thing that we'll have forever. Next, theater sparks communication, and it leads to empathy. These are things that have kind of been touched on tonight. But we live in a time where things are very divisive, and there's a need to be right. But theater offers the opportunity to share in our humanity and to find common ground. One of the my most favorite quotes that I took from college, it was a class I believe in directing or playwriting, is this: the best plays don't make statements, they ask questions. Messages, when they're delivered as a story, are much more likely to tug at your heart and make you want to think and change than if you feel like you're being commanded or given a black and white answer. One of my favorite plays that I had the privilege of getting to be a part of was a play called The Christians by Lucas Nath. And he writes, in his play, the plot is a pastor gets up in front of his congregation and he shares a sermon, and in his sermon he drops a pretty big bomb and says that he no longer believes in hell, and therefore we are no longer a church that will subscribe to the fact that hell is real. And then we get the subsequent reactions to that. His wife gets up and speaks, another congregant gets up and speaks, the associate pastor, and we get all kinds of conflicting arguments for, wait, but doesn't the Bible say this, doesn't the Bible say this? And Lucas Nathan, his preface to the play, he says that he feels often the pressure to share his personal beliefs, and people ask him, is this based on a particular pastor? What do you actually believe? And to that, he says, in these kinds of questions, I detect the desire to locate a single visible point. Earlier, he says, the desire to explain away something. And while the plot of The Christians is far from ambiguous, the play is a series of contradictory arguments. No single argument wins. There's no resolution. The lack of obvious resolution can be uncomfortable, agitating, but we can also take pleasure in the agitation. And maybe something more complex and true becomes visible within the agitation, amidst the collision of disparate perspectives. So again, I'm not here to try to make a statement on that particular topic, but it just is such a great example of being able to just sit in the discomfort of something, to be able to sit in something that we get to go out into the street and say, what did you think of this? And just the idea of someone watching a piece of theater and maybe someone's laughing at something while someone's next to them is crying, or maybe someone's saying, I don't understand this, this went over my head. So that is just, I believe, very, very valuable. Next, theater builds confidence and vulnerability at the same time. In a culture that is increasingly digitized, our attention spans are dwindling by the year, by the second, really. And it's so easy to be able to hide behind a screen or a computer and make a statement out into the ether with no consequence, right? Theater allows and actually forces us to make eye contact, be honest, be able to just relate to one another in a real space, and have that ability to operate in real time and get uncomfortable with people in a room together. I was trained in the Meisner technique, and I will not go into the ins and outs of that particular training, but Meisner is commonly described as a technique that is living truthfully under imaginary circumstances. And so in college, I took my acting teacher trained us using Meisner, and so we would do lots of activities where we would have to have a circumstance and have an activity that's difficult to do, and then there's an interruption, and you have to do a back and forth with another actor, and there's a lot of improvisation involved and repetition, and it gets really uncomfortable, and it feels awkward, it feels unnatural, but you begin to build that muscle of trusting your instincts. You have to answer honestly because you're making it up as you go, and improvisation especially is something that has vast impact for not just if you want to be a performer, but if you just want to do well in life. So, moving on. I found this tweet recently. I was reading an article about the Wicked movie, if there are any fans out there, and this woman is a partner at a major venture capital firm, and she says, one of my more controversial beliefs on raising children is that you probably want to raise theater kids. Theater, debate, speech, song, something that requires performance in front of a room of people alone with a spotlight. I'm feeling that right now. Where if you fail alone. Learning the embarrassment of forgetting a line or your notes as a kid and moving on from it is a valuable skill that's harder to learn and gets more painful with age. Sports won't teach a kid this. Now, I don't want to get into a debate about sports. I love sports. I'm not dogging sports. I actually could probably stand up here and give another speech about how important I think sports are as well. I think they're equally important. But there is something about failing that is weirdly encouraged in the theater. I did a program many years ago where our mantra was fail big, because if you're gonna fail, you might as well do it big, people, because that's the only way you're gonna learn from it and the only way you're gonna be able to know how to overcome it. But unlike sports or like an academic class, failing is actually encouraged in a way. Finally, theater can improve mental health. I won't repeat what I've already said about confidence and community and belonging, but we live in a time where loneliness and isolation are rampant, and especially post-COVID. And so to be able to, again, be in a room with people where it's a safe space, you can be silly, you can do crazy things and it's accepted, it's a really unique thing. And studies have actually been shown that things like psychodrama, which is role-playing, where you sort of role-play yourself and work things out in your life, can actually lead to perspective shifts, more positive behavior and attitudes toward yourself and your loved ones, and can really have profound impact on your life. And so you may be wondering, what happened to Backtrack? So I left the group voluntarily in 2021, and it was for reasons that are for another time, but I left on great terms. We're actually still very good friends. I support their shows, they support me and what I'm doing, and we actually used to say, we toured and did a bunch of crazy shows in random tumbleweed towns, and sometimes shows were great, sometimes shows were not, but we would always say, if you end strong, they forgive it all. And so I feel like we brought that into my departure from the group. It was really, really hard. I'd done it for 7 years, like I said, and but we have deep respect for one another, and we wanted to end strong, and so we did that. But I just want to encourage all of you. We have some theater people in the audience. Keep doing it, keep failing and learning from it, and thank you so much for listening.